good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander. We are back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I put my version 1.0 for the deck list of the commander in front of you for your consideration on my quest to outbrew your favorite Magic channel. Man, we are in week 3 of March of the Machine, and it's been really cool so far how much not only new commanders get our juices flowing when it comes to brewing, but how new cards can get our juices flowing to want to brew old commanders, to take a look at older commanders or ideas for older decks, because a new card can change the way you look at a commander. And so today is an example of a deck where this is a idea I had floating around, but it took a couple new cards for me to say, hey, man, this actually could be pretty solid. There's some new cards that came out for it, and specifically one pretty big dinosaur came out that made me want to make this deck. Today we are talking about Henzie Toolbox Torre. 1 black, 1 red, 1 green, 3 mana, 3/3 for a legendary Devil Rogue. It says each creature you cast with mana value 4 or greater has Blitz. The Blitz cost is equal to its mana cost. So when we cast it with Blitz, it gets haste, and it automatically dies at the end step, or sacrifices at the beginning of the end step, and when it dies, we draw a card. So whenever it dies, we draw a card, whether it's at the end step or not, but we have to sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step, and we'll talk about how we can take advantage of that in a second. Blitz costs you pay cost 1 less for each time you've cast your commander from the commands on this game. Okay, so Henzie's going to allow us to cast our creatures with haste, which I think is a pretty big thing. It's going to allow us to get some big creatures down for cheap, hopefully with some reductions, but it's also going to give them haste to attack, which I think is going to make a lot of our creatures better. But what I've tried to do with the deck is not only just have some big bodies for us to blitz in and hit some damage. What I also want to do is put some ways in the deck to either recur creatures once they, of course, get sacrificed at the end step, sacrifice them before that trigger goes off to kind of take advantage of that effect, right? Take advantage of the fact they're going to die and draw us a card. And then on later turns, find a way to recur them, actually bring them back, right? After they've already been, sacrificed with the Blitz or whatever it may be, to kind of come back for more value. So 39 creatures in the deck. This is probably the biggest deck I've had for creatures, but it makes sense because we want so many of these creatures' effects to do certain things. I'm on land base for the deck. I don't normally talk about land bases, but I'll show it here. The big difference here is I'm playing the pain lands only because we really want to get Henzie out as quickly as possible. So I think we want the pain lands to be available. And we're playing a few more basics because we have some cards that can get us basics when they come in or when they attack or fairly things like that. Okay, coming up into the enchantments, a lot of this is kind of what you'd expect to see out of a Gruul heavy attacking deck, but some of this is going to be the things that go with Henzie. Agasol, we have so many things that make treasures and they either deal damage or when they attack. So Agasol's a way for us to end the game eventually if we're going to get into those attacking routes. Druid's Repository is a card that I've been trying in some of my new decks as far as personal-wise go, and I think it's going to work out here. Whenever a creature we control attacks, we put a counter on it, and we can remove a counter of it to add a mana. This is going to help us with the Agasol. It's going to help us cast more creatures. I think Druid's Repository is one of those cards that the upside is massive, and then the minimum is probably pretty bad depending on the situation, but I think it's worth the shot. Evolutionary Leap is going to be a way to use our creatures that are already going to get Blitz to get us value. So pay a green, sacrifice creature, reveal cards on the top until you hit a creature, put that card into your hand, put the rest in the bottom. So if we have enough mana, sacrifice those 1 or 2 creatures we blitzed in, get the cards back to our hands, we draw those cards with the blitz triggers, and now we're up on our value, and we kind of got something back other than our attacks. Garrick's Uprising, of course, getting us that trample, and then drawing if one of those big creatures comes in. Heartless Summoning, creature spells cost 2 less to cast, and then creatures get -1/-1. Well, we don't care about the -1/-1 because most of our creatures are huge. The only downside to Heartless Summoning is we do have a couple mana dorks that are 1/1, so we kind of have to be careful, but I think it's one of those things where you use your value out on the mana dorks, get the Heartless Summoning down, and then it's kind of your mana dork, right? That 2 cost reduction is going to be a lot. Think about it. As soon as we put Henzie down on the battlefield, it's already reducing those things by 1. Something like Heartless Summoning is just going to reduce it even more. Industrial Advancement's an interesting card. It's the beginning of the end step. You may sack a creature. If you do, look at the top X, where X is that creature's mana value. You can put a creature from among them on the battlefield, put the rest in the bottom. So this is cool because we could stack this trigger before the Blitz goes off at the end step to take one of them out and get something off the battlefield. So pick the biggest thing get something on the battlefield, and then we get that draw trigger from the Blitz. So this kind of card is great because, again, we're taking something that's already going to die anyway and getting value from an oversold cemetery at the beginning of your upkeep. If you have 4 more creatures in your battlefield or your graveyard, put target creature from your graveyard into your hand. Well, this is great because we're probably going to be discarding. We're probably going to be blitzing those creatures in a lot. So what this is going to allow us to get the good ones back to our hand. And I think this is an important idea of trying to get the good stuff back to our hand. Phyrexian Reclamation could do something very similar. 1 in a black, pay 2 life, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. We do have a bunch of reanimation effects, but we also want ways to get them back to our hand, because there may be creatures that we don't want to reanimate, but we want to replay them from our hand, or they're easier to replay them from our hand than they are to reanimate. Like if we have reductions like this, or like a Gorklock Terracow Season when we're playing in the main list, or things like that, well, it's going to be easier to get them back to our hand and cast them from our hand for cheaper than it would be to pay 7 or 8 life with a reanimate to get something back. So something to keep in mind. And then River Tears has said, as he says, whenever you sacrifice a creature, you may return target creature card with lesser mana value from your graveyard to the battlefield tap. Do this once each turn. What this is going to do is, on the end step, when we're sacrificing those creatures to Blitz or to other abilities, like if we had Industrial Advancement and this out, if we sacked creature to Industrial Advancement, we could activate River Tears Ascendancy as well at the same time and get something back. So I like this card. I mean, it is a once per turn, which kind of stinks, but I feel like, again, the name of the game is incremental gain over each turn as we're just pumping out damage, and so I think that is what is going to end up winning us the day as far as that goes. Not a ton of mana rocks. Again, we kind of want them on creatures, but we got Arcane Signet and Henge. Henge is great because it gives us +1/+1 counters on creatures and draws a card, so this is going to make our creatures, when they come in with the Blitz, +1/+1 counter and draw us an extra card, so that's kind of great. Birthing Pod is a card that, of course, I saw all over EDH rec and different deck lists when I was looking at building Henzie. And at first I was like, yeah, Birthing Pod makes sense. You sack the creature before you have to sacrifice it, get a creature with 1+ mana value. Okay, yeah, that seems fine. And then I started realizing, like, how much Birthing Pod can actually do depending on what creature you're sacrificing. Yes, we need to pay attention to CMCs of our or mana values of our creatures, right? If we sacrifice an 8 mana value creature and we only have we know how many 9s, well, then Birthing Pod kind of stinks. So we kind of have to pay attention to what we're sacrificing. But I feel like if we kind of take the second to learn our creature base and understand where our specific creatures are in the mana value lineup, I feel like Birthing Pod's one of those cards that can easily cheat us from a good 4-drop to an amazing 5-drop, or a great 5-drop to an amazing 6-drop. And remember, we only need to pay 1 mana because we could pay 2 life for that on the tap, and I think we're willing to do that depending on what creature we can go get. Cauldron of Souls seems to be one of the best cards in this deck we can get. It says choose any number of creatures until each of those creatures gains persist until end of turn. So this is cool because basically what it is when those creatures die, they're going to come back with a -1/-1 count on it, and kind of we're going to get all of them back. You pair this with a Great Henge, or I'd kind of thought about something like Rhythm of the Wild to pair with this, because then you put that +1/+1 counter on it, it cancels out the -1/-1 counter, and you can persist to them again if they were to die or whatever like that. But I think Cauldron of Souls is great. It's going to bring you those creatures back each turn, and we could find some way to mitigate the -1/-1 counters if we find that being really important. And then sort of Hearth and Home, kind of a cool card, because you get to blink that creature, and at first I didn't really think about it, but then I was like, oh wait, you blink the Blitz creature and it comes back without Blitz when it comes back in. So basically you get to keep that creature that you want to keep out of that combat. You put sort of Hearth and Home on something that was already there, and so I like these kind of interactions here. I think this is where the Henzie deck really shines, is these cards that are going to allow us to either keep our creatures or manipulate our creatures to keep them around, so we keep getting that value. All right, as far as the instants go, Assassin's Trophy for some removal, Force of Vigor for some removal, Rushed Rebirth, so choose target creature. When that creature dies this turn, we get a creature with less mana value and put it on the battlefield tapped. This is just a way, if we blitz out something huge, we can Rush Rebirth and get something better, less CMC, but still very good from our deck. Deadly Relic for some removal, and then a pair of Tutors. We still want the Tutors because I still feel like there's going to be cards in the early game that are going to help us set up. We have some creatures that do a really good job at getting lands and things like that. In the end game, we want cards that are going to finish the game. So I think that these tutors do a good job at just increasing the toolbox of our deck, kind of finding our ways to get the things we want. Farseek, Nature's Law, Rampant Growth, 3 visits for a ramp. Again, we have a bunch of creatures that tap for mana and things like that. So we don't necessarily need 9 ramp spells, but we do want a good portion. Reanimate, because we still want to reanimate. I think we still want to have a reanimation option, especially to bring stuff back. And then Victimize seems like a great card in this deck. Choose 2 creature cards, sacrifice 1. Bring the other end tapped. Victimize works really well when we have things like Workshop War Chief and Thragtusk. I mean, you can just sacrifice a token that one of these creatures makes and get back 2 regular creatures. So I really like Victimize. Again, the more and more I think about it, the more and more I like Rhythm of the Wild for this strategy, but I just couldn't get there with on my version 1.0 list. You know, the way this series works and the way I approach deck building is you always need to start somewhere, do some testing, and figure out what makes a deck tick. And this is one of those decks that, like, having never piloted Henzie before, I wasn't entirely sure where our ratios are going to be. And so I'm hoping I can figure out this some more as I try to play it for myself. All right. 39 creatures, friends. If you're not interested in me going through all the creatures individually, because I know some people are interested, that deck list is going to be down in the description. Check it out. Give me a like, subscribe if you want to see some more content. But let's rock through all of the creatures in the deck and talk about kind of where our intentions are for these. If you're interested, I was able to find on Reddit a bunch of people talking about what creature choices you should give for Henzie, including a link to a Discord and just a bunch of information about Henzie. So if Henzie's a deck you're interested in and you want to do some more research, check out check out the spoiler page for Henzie in the EDH subreddit. Check out a bunch of other things. There's a bunch of people who have posted, and there's a bunch of great conversation that led me to help kind of figuring out how I wanted to set up this creature base, and it's definitely a resource that's out there for you. All right, first up, we got our dragons, our ancient dragons. Ancient Brass Dragon, again, our goal here is to blitz it in, so it's going to have haste, so it's going to be able to attack. So we're more than likely going to be able to get these effects the turn they come down. Brass Dragon says we roll a d20, of course, and we get to put in and target creature cards with total mana value X or less from graveyards onto the battlefield under control. So not just our graveyard, any graveyard. And we're hoping to get it high because we're probably going to have other things in the graveyard. Copper, we're going to do the same thing, but get treasures. This is where the kind of Agasol idea comes from, is we have a couple of creatures that just make treasures when they die or when they attack. And so we're going to get good value there. Archpriest of Shadows is one of the new cards that honestly had me kind of intrigued, and for this deck specifically. So it has backup 1, so when it comes into the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on any creature. When you do, they get the effect underneath it, which is Death Touch, and when this creature deals combat damage to a player or battle, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This seems really killer in this deck, because basically what happens is I blitz this in, I give another creature the same ability, and then Archpriest of Shadows can attack as well. So I may potentially be able to bring 2 creatures back. Or what happens is I give it on a big creature that's already going to be able to get in, and then get that reanimation effect for free off of this. And then next turn, I have Archpriest of Shadows to deal with, or it gets, blitzed away and we try to reanimate it. But I like this. I kind of like this value that we get, not only on itself if we blitz it in, but on another creature as well. At Sushi, Flying Turtle, when it dies, we either can exile the top 2 and play them, or create 3 treasures. This is pretty great because we can reanimate this thing, we can bring it back, we could sacrifice it and get those treasures. There's a lot of fun things we can do with that Sushi, but I think it's one of those great cards that's going to be really helpful. Birds of Paradise, of course, we need to tap for some mana, and I think this is the perfect deck for a card like Birds of Paradise. We love things like Llanowar Elves, of course, but I think we want the mana dorks that tap for anything, not just for green. Like we really need to be able to do turn 1, turn 2 Birds of Paradise or Ignoble Hierarch, and then be able to get down Henzie turn 2, turn 3. We really want to get them down right away and get Henzie down right away so we can start doing that. Body Snatcher, when it enters the battlefield, exile it unless you discard a creature card. Not going to be very hard. We have a ton of creature cards in the deck. And then whenever it dies, exile it and return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Cool. Free recursion. And it's something we already want to be doing. Body Snatcher is not a giant body. So the bad part about blitzing it in is that it's not going to be very useful that way. But but I don't think we care because we're going to be able to record something for free. Chainer, another great card I hadn't really thought about until I read it on the list. Discard a card, you may cast a creature spell from your graveyard. This turn, activate only once each turn. Well, you can blitz that if you have Henzie out. You could blitz that creature spell that you cast. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it didn't cast from your hand, it gains haste. Okay, well, this is great because now, well, we already could blitz out of the graveyard anyway. But what I like about this is we can just now hard cast things out of our graveyard with Chainer, and they're going to come in with haste and not have to be sacrificed at the end of the turn. So I really like Chainer for that reason. It kind of acts as a little mini commander in the deck. Champion Aronis, whenever it attacks, we can exert it. If we do put a creature card from your hand on the battlefield, no special things, we just put it on the battlefield. I love this for something like Archpriest of Shadows or some of the other cards we have, just to put a free creature down and get good value. Drana. Whenever it attacks, defending player chooses a non-legendary creature card in your graveyard. You return that card to a battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it, and that creature's a vampire, or other types. Here we go. More recursion on something that we're attacking with. We could do this every turn if we don't blitz this in. And yes, it is non-legendary. It is our opponent's choice, but I feel like if we don't have a ton of good choices for our opponents in our graveyard, of course they're going to pick the thing that they want. Okay, here's the card that made me want to build Henzie more than a lot of other things. Atali Primal Conqueror. Whenever it enters the battlefield, each player exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land card. You may cast any number of spells this way without paying their mana costs. Here's a 7/7 for 7 that we can blitz in. Or my thought process was start putting this down with something like Ilharg the Razeboar, something that puts things on the battlefield for free, like Champion Aronis. Get this ability for free. Get those spells off people's decks, including our own, and just start printing value. I love the idea of Atali, and if we have enough mana, we can flip it to the backside and potentially knock someone out of the game with the poison counters that are involved. All right, fell down the third path. It's a very interesting card, and this is one of the cards that when I saw it, I was like, this card seems bonkers, depending on what our graveyard looks like. It says, create a token that's a copy of target creature card in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to other types. It gains haste, sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. Here we go. We, for literally 3 mana, get to make a token, a copy of anything that's in our graveyard. It comes in, it gets haste, it can attack, we could sacrifice to other effects, we can get value out of it, and then we would sacrifice it at the end step. So it doesn't blitz, we don't get to draw the card. But what I think is useful about something like this is you could pair it with some of these other cards that will just sacrifice things for value, like Torre or Gulkar Gisa, and just get value out of that token. I mean, you could do this every turn. First Responder is a card that I really like. This is a card I originally had played it in a Vola list I had a long time ago, but I think it fits really well here. At the beginning of your end step, you may return another creature card you control to its owner's hand, then put a number of +1/+1 counters equal to that creature's power on First Responder. Well, think about this. We, at the start of our end step, are going to have a couple blitz triggers, probably, right? Well, First Responder is going to knock one of them back to our hand, get some counters on it, and then that creature is going to be safe, and then we just have to deal with the rest. We can pick the biggest one, we can pick the lowest one. It doesn't really matter. I think First Responder just wants to put the right creature back into our hand for what we need for the situation. Gamekeeper is a really interesting card. When it dies, you can exile it. If you do reveal cards from the top of your library until you hit a creature, put that on the battlefield, and all other cards this way into your graveyard. So this is kind of an interesting card. We can game this and get a bunch of things onto the battlefield, or we can use this for the right moment and get a bunch of things on the battlefield. But I feel like this is one of those cards, again, where it has decent value. It can get us things from our library and potentially cheat them out without us having to cast them or blitz them and lose them. Gulkar Gisa just feels really right for a strategy like this. Sacrifice a creature, create that many 2/2 zombies, and where the X is the sacrifice creature's power. Well, this is great because we do this in response to the Blitz being sacrificed on the end step, get a bunch of zombies, those zombies can block, and then worst case scenario, next turn they can start attacking. So this is one of those like key cards I think in the deck as far as dealing with the Blitz triggers and getting advantage. Giant Edivage is just a giant body. This is a card that I wanted to play for a long time, and this just felt like the deck. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of it. So here we go, we blitz it in, we hit somebody with it, we get a copy of it, the original one dies, and we still have the copy that retains that ability, and then we just continue to get more Ediphages. Love a card like this. It's stompy, it's good times, and I love it. Goblin Arcane, answer each spell you cast that's red or green costs 1 less. Well, this is just great. This is going to help reduce that blitz cost, and this is the kind of card we want. We talked about Gorklaw being in the deck. Gorklaw needed to be in the deck, reducing those big spells. Anything with power 4 or greater is reduced by 2. This is going to help us a ton of getting those big creatures down, and this does help us because it will actually reduce the blitz cost as well. So I really love that. I think that's kind of perfect card for the deck. Homura Human Ascendant isn't actually a card I had thought about until I saw it on a list of cards and what is that? It says it can't block, and when it's put into the graveyard from play, return it to the play flipped. Okay, well, we could blitz this in, and we know this is going to happen right away. And it flips into Homura's Essence. Creatures you control get +2/+2 and have flying, and red, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. All of our creatures then have flying, and they all have fire breathing. This is the kind of card that seems pretty darn cool. We could search it out, we could get it on the battlefield, get it flipped, and then potentially just start winning the game at that point with all of our flyers getting over. So this is a card I really like, and I think this is a really great effect for a deck like this. Ignoble Hierarch, we talked about, getting us that mana. Ilharg the Razor, a card I really love. Whenever it attacks, you put a creature from your hand tapped and attacking, you return that creature to the hand at the beginning of the next end step. I think this is great because it can give us these free attackers like the Ancient Dragons or Atali or things like these massive creatures that are going to come in and attack and then go back to our hand, but we still get the value from that creature. I like Atali specifically because if you think about it, if you could put it down and bring it back up, we get that ETB trigger over and over and over again. Now there are other creatures that I wouldn't mind putting down with a with an Ilharg, but I'm just trying to say that there's a lot of really good choices here of things we can dump down, hit with, and then bring back up to our hand and do this every turn. Nilharg's a 6/6 with trample by itself, so it's a pretty tough body to deal with on its own. Junji the Midnight Sky can get into some interesting things. Whenever it dies, we choose one. Your opponent discards 2 cards and loses 2 life, or put a non-dragon creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, you lose 2 life. We can use this to reanimate other creatures. We can use this to do a lot of fun things. I'm so glad that I finally got to use Junji in a deck because it seems like such an interesting card. I just never could find the body for it. All right, Kethik, Crucible Goliath from Phyrexian Obi-Wan. This is a card that does not have a ton of value, but I finally found a deck where we can use it. So at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice another creature. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary creature card with less mana value. Put on the battlefield, then put the rest on the bottom in any order. This is great because you could sack one of your blitz creatures, go get something for the privilege, and now you're up on card advantage because you're also going to draw the card off the blitz. Kadama the East Tree feels broken in this deck. You blitz in a creature, put a creature down for free. Blitz in a creature, put a land down from your hand. Kadama the East Tree is just so much good, and I think it does even better in a deck like this because we're just going to be able to put down extra things. Marauding Raptor just going to straight reduce all of our creature spells by 1. Has something about and when a creature comes in, it deals 2 damage to it, and if it's a dinosaur, it gets extra. We need to be careful with the 2 damage because there are some creatures in the deck that have less than 2 toughness, but it's just something, again, we have to have the foresight and play around it. Baron of Clan Neltoth. I was trying to think of ways to get things back from the graveyard and get them back consistently, and Baron seemed like a great one. Whenever a creature we control dies, we get an experience counter, and so the cool part about the experience counters is the experience counters don't go away. So if we were to put Marin down and a couple things died and someone got rid of Marin, we could bring it back and we'd still have the experience counter, so Marin would still get the value. And then it says at the beginning of your end step, choose a creature in your graveyard. If that CMC is less than the number of experience counters, return to the battlefield, otherwise put it in your hand. Well, this is kind of great because we're still going to be able to pull things back to our hand. But best case scenario, we could put it onto the battlefield. So I really like Marin. I think it's again, like Chainer, it's kind of a mini commander in a sense because it's going to kind of help us do the things we want to do and get us value. Mikaeus the Unhollow seems really good in this deck. Whenever a human deals damage to you, destroy it. We don't really care much about that ability. We care about the bottom ability. You have the non-human creatures you control get +1/+1 and have Undying. Undying says the creature dies. If so, you bring it back with a, I believe it's a -1/-1 counter. Oh, no plus. You bring it back with a +1/+1 counter on it. Well, that's great because now, if it had a +1/+1 counter, the Undying wouldn't work, but you'd bring it back with a counter on it. Now we blitzed it, we've seen it die, so we get the card off the blitz draw, and now it's coming back. So a card like Mikaeus is great because now we don't have to spend the energy reoccurring it. It's just going to come back, and you still get any death triggers that you need to get because it's still with the graveyard. Gnawbone, whenever a creature we control deal damage to a player, we get that many treasures. Again, the treasures help with the Ag Assault line, but they also help with just giving us more mana to blitz more creatures. I mean, the more treasures we have, the more creatures we can blitz, and the potential to end the game in a turn, depending on how many treasures we have. I mean, things like Gnawbone and Copper can get out of hand depending on how big your board is and how much you're doing. Pathbreaker seems like a great finisher for this deck. Creatures you control gain trample and plus X, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Put a couple big boys down, attack, get them almost near doubled or just well increased with Pathbreaker. And the cool part about Pathbreaker Ibex is we can blitz it in, right? So it's kind of a mini Craterhoof for us. I didn't put Craterhoof in the deck. I chose to go for something like Pathbreaker Ibex instead. But of course, there's plenty of other options we could have picked as far as overrun effects go. I just don't know how much we'll need them considering how big some of our creatures are. Primeval Herald seems like a really great choice for this deck. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may search your library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tap. So when it comes in, we get the basic land. When it attacks, we get the basic land. And we don't care if it dies in combat because we're still going to draw for the blitz if we blitz this thing in. So this card seems great, and it's the reason why I'm playing a couple more extra basic lands. Protein Hulk seems like a great card in this deck. Whenever it's put into the graveyard from play, search your library for any number of creature cards with total mana value 6 or less and put them into play. Well, this is great. If Protein Hulk is something we blitz really early in the game, this can go get the rest of our mana dorks, and this can also go get a lot of creatures in our deck. Anything 6 or less we can go and get, or any combination of 6 or less we can go and get. This gets a lot of creatures in our deck. And not only that, this doesn't blitz the creature in, so this changes a lot of our choices for the deck. I mean, you think about this, Protein Hulk could go get Goreclaw and a Mana Dork. This could go get something just like a Terror of the Peaks or Copper Dragon, just 6, and put it on the battlefield. I mean, there's so many options for Protein Hulk, and that's why I like it. Ruthless Technomancer. When it enters the battlefield, we could sack another creature. If we do, create a number of treasures equal to that creature's power. Well, this is great. The bigger the creature, we're sacrificing the more treasures, and then we still get that draw from the blitz and that kind of thing. And then for 2 and a black, we can sacrifice X artifacts to return target creature card power X or less from the graveyard to our battlefield. X can't be 0. Well, here we go. Here's some recursion if we have the spare treasures, and this is the only way we have to do it. Sea Guide Ash seems really good. I'd never seen this card before. When it's put into play, graveyard from play, search your library for up to 3 forest cards, put on the battlefield tapped if you do shuffle. Well, this is great because we blitz it in, sacrifice it to Golgargisa or its own blitz cost or something else, and we go get 3 forest cards. We do have some dual lands in the deck, so we can go get those, or we're just going to go get basic forests. And now we're up a ton of mana for something that we just played. Selvala can tap for mana in any combination of colors where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. The bigger the creatures we have, the more mana we tap for, and the more cards we can blitz. Terror of the Peaks, kind of a little mini engine that could help us take the game down a little quicker. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield our control, it deals damage to that creature's power to any target. Well, the more we blitz in, the better. This will see things getting reanimated. This will see things blitzing in. I think Terror of the Peaks, this has a pretty big upside in what it'll see, and it'll start dealing damage to our opponents. And then it's not a bad body on itself, being a 5/4. So I like Terror of the Peaks. We definitely don't want to. We definitely don't want to blitz this one in. We want to keep it down and start using it. Thragtusk, when it enters the battlefield, we gain 5 life, and when it leaves, we get a 3/3 beast. Well, this is great. We blitz it in, get the 5 life, attack with it, and then when it leaves, we draw the card and get a 3/3. This works very similar to something like Workshop War Chief, where we gain 3 life, and then we make a 4/4 when it leaves. So both of these cards are great recursion targets because they come back in, get the life, sacrifice them, get the token. And again, those are things we can do over and over again, and then we can use those tokens for different effects as well. Ulamog is basically only in here for the position that we may draw through this deck. We may draw through it fairly quickly, depending on how many things we're blitzing. So what I wanted to do was create a way for us to get a pretty solid protection scheme in case we start drawing way too much. And Ulamog's it. Whenever it's put into a graveyard from anywhere, its owner shuffles their graveyard into their library. So this can kind of reset everything back and hopefully get us out of trouble if we start drawing too many cards. Now we can respond to the trigger if we needed to reanimate something else, if we wanted to not lose something in our graveyard. But it's just a big body. We could blitz it in. Annihilator 4, 10/10. I mean, it's going to do a lot of harm in its way, but it's really in there for one if we need to blitz it. And then if we blitz it and it goes to the graveyard, it's still going to shuffle itself back in. So I think there's a ton of upside to Ulamog. We could have picked any of the Shuffle Titans. I just think I like Ulamog the best because of the blitz is still a cast, so we're still going to get the destroy target permanent. I guess we could have picked Kozilek as well. We really, in all reality, could put more than one Shuffle Titan in here if we really want to. I just didn't want to put too many. I didn't want to run the risk of shuffling my graveyard back into the deck when I'm still trying to do things with it. Wormcoil, whenever it dies, we get 2 tokens. This is pretty great, and then you can recur it and get more tokens. I think Wormcoil is a great draw for that. And then Zia Torre, another mini commander in the deck. Beginning your end step, you may sack another creature. When you do, it deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target, and you create 3 treasures. So sack one of those Blitz creatures, get some damage out of it, and still get the 3 treasure tokens to speak for. But what do you guys think? Let me know what you think of Henzie down in the comment section. This is a deck that I'm very excited to play, and I'm hoping maybe it's something that becomes more in my rotation, because it's a deck that I like. It's a deck I like the idea of, and I'm hoping it works out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time.